If somebody's tuning in right now, they're feeling skeptical because they feel like they've tried all the different diets out there and they've, not had any success to this point, and we want to hook them early and let them know we have something different here. What would you say to them?
Well, I would actually say there's a new science of the metabolism that really tells us how to take control of our own lives, and that our metabolism really is not our destiny determined from birth, but that we can actually take some concrete steps, very easy steps to get on that right path. And then there's very concrete steps we can take to up our game along the way.
And when it comes to metabolism, a good jumping off place is to talk about the concept of carrying extra body weight and how this actually slows the metabolism.
Right. Well,
which is kind of backwards the way people typically think about it. So I'll have you elaborate on that.
Right. Well, for many years, we thought that people were born with a slow metabolism or a fast metabolism. Even doctors actually had that idea. That's kind of what we were taught in medical school. But it turns out more recent research, in fact, only research that's only 2 years old, shows that all humans are hardwired with our metabolism the same way that your laptop has an operating system. And when you take it out of the box you come home from the store and start it up, everyone's body is like the laptop out of the box. Our metabolism is designed and hardwired to work exactly the same way. And it turns out that all humans are wired to actually go through only 4 phases of metabolism. From 0 to 1 year old, our metabolism skyrockets to 50% higher than what it's going to be when we're an adult. From 1 year old to 20 years old, our metabolism actually comes down to adult levels, down, 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 down. Okay. Doesn't rise like you think teenagers might be full of energy and bouncing off the walls. Metabolism is going up, right? Wrong. And it turns out that the third stage, which is the most surprising actually for most adults, from age 20 to age 60, human metabolism is hardwired to be completely rock stable, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. It's not supposed to change. Our hardwiring tells us we're designed to have the same amount of energy and the same fuel efficiency all throughout our adult lives. I'll come back to why that's a problem. And then from age 60 to 90, we do have a slight decrease, only about 17%. So when you're 90, your metabolism's hardwiring says slow down about 17% to when you were 16, which basically is the same as when you're 20. So what I'm telling you is that 60 can be the new 20 if you follow your metabolism. And it's the problem of excess body fat that actually sits on top of our metabolism. So it's not that a slow metabolism causes us to grow body fat and gain weight. It's the other way around. Excess body fat actually suppresses our metabolism. And that means the power is actually in our hands to do something about it.
So let's talk about that period of time. You mentioned the 4 different phases. Let's talk about that second phase where from 2 through our teens, the metabolism's slowly coming down, which would be a surprise to a lot of people, including myself, because typically during that teen period, we can eat a lot of food, or at least, this was my experience being a teen, and I was skinny as a rail. And I know that's not the case for everybody, but I know a lot of teens are in that boat. Is it just because of the increased amount of activity during that period, or what's going on there?
Yeah, well, think about it. I'm telling you, our hardwiring for our metabolism is following a program, again, like the operating system on your laptop. It doesn't want to actually do anything different. Now, at the same time that we're teens, okay, other things are happening in our body. We're kind of unfolding our wings like a butterfly coming out of a cocoon and starting to sprout wings, get bigger, taller, grow our muscles. All those things actually take more energy. So although our hardwiring says stay with the stable energy, the fact that we're actually getting taller, getting more muscular, starting to take our body shape, now we actually need more fuel, which is coming from the food that we eat, in order to be able to power up that additional growth. And so if you think about food as the fuel for our metabolism, although our metabolism is actually coming down, by the way, it's not slowing down to unnatural levels. It's actually just coming down to our adult level. Partly it's because that first skyrocketing at age 1 is so high that actually we've got some room to come down to hit our adult our adult peak. So I would say that it's really the fact that we've overshot at age 1, and then secondly, that we're actually starting to unfold our wings, so to speak, as we're gaining all these other body functions and our height, that we're actually using. We're consuming more energy as we actually unfold our own other physical programming.
Another layer to this could be the fact that some of the fat we could be building during those teen years might not be visible fat. So it could be the visceral fat in around the organs. And then maybe when we're, between 20 and 40, it finally catches up with us.
Well, here's another way to look at it. Think about it. When we are kids, the boys and girls in your class actually look exactly the same. They're pretty much all rail, they're straight up and down, right? But when we're actually in our adolescence, as we're going through our prepubertal years, our teenage years, through adolescence, what happens is that the shape of males and females begins to change. And part of that is actually the redistribution of body fat. So what actually happens is, you're absolutely correct, that in boys and men, people with a Y chromosome, actually what's happening is that we actually gain more visceral fat. So although we get taller and we get a little wider, the tube of our body gets wider, there's more fat stuffed inside. All right. And then for females, teenage girls, what actually happens is that their subcutaneous fat slims down. They redistribute body fat around the hips, around the breasts, around the buttocks. And basically, it's when we start to unfold. If you think about the Venus de Milo, the statue, and the Statue of David, right? So those are sort of two iconic shapes of humans between male and female. That's actually what starts to happen during adolescence. And so the distribution of body fat also actually changes. So the extra body fat that you're referring to, that we can quote pay for later, that only happens if we overeat, or if we eat the wrong things over time during our adolescence. It's true. We can overthrow our hardwiring of our metabolism. The same way you can actually download a program that contains viruses on your laptop, even after you open it up out of the box, and you can actually screw up your operating system. And now you got to take it in to do the antivirus program to clean it all up. And so I think it's really important for us to understand hardwiring of our metabolism tells us what we're capable of. And as long as we actually allow our body to achieve its potential, that's how we optimize our metabolism at any age.
A few scary things when it comes to the visceral fat is, one, like we talked about, it's not always visible. It's actually not visible. Two, a lot of people are going to be motivated to burn fat only when they can see their body changing. So if it's not an aesthetic thing, they might not have the same motivation. And three, this is the dangerous kind of fat that does a lot of damage in the body. So it's kind of like a triple threat when you look at it that way.
It is true. But again, don't forget, we have to have some body fat. It's healthy for us. It makes hormones. It's our cushion against injury. If we fall on the ground, it's actually a fuel reservoir. It's our fuel tank. So there's a lot of good things about body fat. It's only when it's excess it's actually a problem. Now, here's a super easy way for people to get an idea of how much visceral fat they have, because all you got to do is to look at your waistline, your waist circumference. So if you're a guy and you wear a belt, all right, how many holes do you actually need to go in order to wear your pants comfortably, right? That's kind of like, if you need to really loosen it up, it means your waist circumference is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, which actually means you're growing visceral fat. That's the harmful stuff. And you can notice that. I mean, we've all been through this at some point in our life. If you're an adult, you've gone through a period where, your waist starts to expand and you really loosen up a belt loop. But we've also, many of us have actually been in a place where we get in better shape. And then we are able to tighten our belt loop. And that's really one of the easiest ways, without using a DEXA scan or a CT scan or any kind of other fat calibration method. There's all kinds of technology out there, but the easiest kind of like romper room way to actually figure out if you actually are losing harmful visceral fat is just to check your waist circumference, your belt size.
Let's talk about why visceral fat is different. Get into the physiology and talk about why that is so dangerous.
So, there's two kinds of fat there's three kinds of main fat. There's white fat, which is wiggly and jiggly, and it can be visceral or it could be subcutaneous, meaning under the skin. And then there's brown fat, which is paper thin and it's close to the bone, and it actually is good fat that generates heat to burn down harmful fat. But visceral fat is really the first kind. It's wiggly jiggly, and it's found inside the tube of your body. Visceral meaning gut fat. Visceral fat's the same thing. And if you think about it, it starts off like packing peanuts inside the tube of your body. It's a cushion to prevent if you tripped on the rug and you fell on the floor, your organs are cushioned by a little bit of these packing peanuts, and so it's going to be fine. Now, visceral fat, by the way, has another function. It actually contains part of our immune system. I want to talk about the good part first. Our immune system, and I can tell you what it does. There's a specific organ. There's even a sub-organ of fat. Our whole fat is an organ. There's one part of our fat called the omentum, O-M-E-N-T-U-M. Most people who are not doctors will have never heard of it because it is actually it's like an apron of fat, healthy fat, that crawls around our body like an octopus. You know, if you see those videos online or on like Discovery Channel, the octopus going around the rock and the reef, just looking for places crevices to go into. That's the omentum, made out of body fat. Here's what it does. It patrols our abdomen, our belly, on the inside around our intestines, doing a couple of things. Number one, it conducts surveillance to make sure there are no leaks or cracks or injuries to our gut. You know, our gut is full of bacteria, and our gut is actually full of poop. Can you imagine if there's a perforation, a tiny hole, or an injury, and all that bacteria seeps out from the tube of your intestines into the viscera, into the open cavity of your body? I'll tell you as a doctor what would happen. You would get septic, you would go to the ICU, and there's a good chance you would die. All right? So thank goodness for the omentum, this healthy fat, this octopus. It's kind of like a mix between an octopus and a baseball glove, and it basically cruises around your belly silently. You can't feel it, and it can get in between the intestines. Now look, your intestines is about 40 feet of a tube, all folded up, like packed into a suitcase, which is our belly. And the omentum conducts surveillance to make sure that everything is hunky-dory and actually fine and there's no inflammation. Now, the omentum also, this is visceral fat, also secretes those hormones, leptin to help control our appetite, adiponectin, which is another hormone to allow insulin to draw our energy in, our fuel, our glucose, more efficiently into our cell, and resistin, which is actually to allow us to have a little bit less versus a little bit more energy drawn in. Okay, this is all healthy stuff. Now, the other thing that omentum contains, it actually contains part of our immune system. So think of our omentum like a battleship that contains ready-to-roll super soldiers inside inside the ship, and basically it's waiting there. And if it actually finds a little hole in our intestines, right? Think about all the stuff that we actually throw down our gut. If there's a little hole, little perforation, immediately that octopus, the omentum, will crawl over there. It'll stick out a tentacle and it will cup that area, and it will blast the super soldiers, the immune system, to clean up that area and kill the infection until it heals. All right. We used to call this the policeman of the abdomen, the omentum. So it's quite amazing. So, okay. So what happens? That's normal. I want to tell you normal because everybody thinks of fat as bad. That's all normal. If you actually grow too much visceral fat, and visceral fat also being fuel cells, and you just keep on piling up fat by overeating, by eating the wrong things, by disrupting your gut health, which then causes your metabolism to go haywire, and then it's easier to to develop body fat. And then what actually happens is that those hormonal functions are disrupted. Basically, think about it like disrupting the hormones, like getting too much visceral fat is like you walk into a symphony hall that's in the middle of a performance of, Beethoven's symphony, and you get in there and you just jump on stage and start throwing, stuff around, emptying a garbage can on stage. You're going to disrupt everything. The music is not going to flow. And that's what actually happens when you develop excess visceral fat. It's dangerous for several reasons. Number one, those hormones. Leptin, adiponectin, resistin, all the things that control how well and efficiently we use our energy, all thrown off course. I don't know. Do we want to absorb more energy or less energy? I can't tell. It's too noisy in here. All right. That immune system super soldiers, well, guess what? They're thrown out of whack as well. They're like, whoa, I don't know what's going on. And so basically your fat unleashes these super soldiers as inflammation. All right. Now you've got inflammation instead of defenders of your body. Now they become inflammatory cells, and they are all over the place, spilling out over your guts. On top of that, if you grow too much visceral fat, and remember, fat normally is a fuel tank that stores the energy into fat cells. If you overstuff that area, the fat will leak out. Okay, it's just like overfilling your gas tank at a gas station. Boom, it comes out, rolls down the side of the car, around your tires, around your shoes. It's a toxic, dangerous, flammable mess. At the gas station, same deal. When you have overflowing fuel, fat will leak out of fat. A liquid will leak out of fat cells, which is supposed to contain them like a fuel tank. And that leaking fat poisons your liver. It's called lipo, meaning fat, toxicity, meaning it's poison to your liver. And in fact, that's actually the cause in our world of abundance of something called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, NAFLD. This is actually a hidden epidemic that is leading to hepatitis and leading to liver cancer when you poison your liver. And by the way, your liver detoxifies your whole body, detoxifies your blood. You damage that organ with leaking excess fat, man, we are in a world of hurt. So what I'm telling you is that normal healthy fat, think about it like an orchestra with a conductor that plays a beautiful symphony. Everybody's in harmony, doing their thing, and it's a performance for your whole life. And when you actually grow too much visceral fat, it's like rushing on stage with garbage cans and dumping them out and completely disrupting the performance. That's how bad it actually is.
I know another reason that people get fatty liver is from too much fructose. Can you talk about that mechanism and is there any overlap between the two?
Yeah, so, I think it is true that if you overload with carbs, including fructose, but also added sugar of any sort, you can actually overwhelm your metabolism, which can then lead the liver to be less efficient and then lead to the accumulation of fat, which then leads to fatty liver disease. So in fact, the process I told you about, regardless if it's fructose or sucrose or, any kind of OS, which is sugars and carbs, it all stems from the same thing. It's fuel. It gets stored into the fuel tank. It leaks out, and then it poisons and is toxic to the liver. So it's not that eating a piece of fruit actually does it because there's something special about the fruit. It's a general overwhelming of it. And fructose, by the way, consumed in, it gets vilified, just like people tend to do in the nutrition and food and health world. Actually, is perfectly fine for most people with normal, healthy metabolisms. There are plenty of people who are in their 80s and 90s and above who actually eat fruit without, poisoning their liver. The problem is when you start out, with the scales tip against you as an adult with bad eating habits, not enough exercise, poor sleep, an excessive amount of stress, and then, you start to overeat as well. All those things are like the four horsemen of the apocalypse that converge to help you grow that extra body fat, which then leaks and causes inflammation. And of course, inflammation being the sort of setting the stage for almost every other undesirable chronic disease that we know.
Well, let's zoom back then. Now we know what happens when the visceral fat gets out of control and the damage it can cause. But let's zoom back and talk about the dietary piece, what we're consuming and when we're consuming that's causing that visceral fat to accumulate.
So the simple analogy I like to give people to think about our metabolism. So set aside calories in, calories out, counting calories. There's so much baggage associated with the term calorie. Think about your body like an engine of a car and the food that you eat providing the fuel. When your fuel is low, it's like a fuel, like your gas tank, your gas gauge in your car. When you see it's low, we feel hungry. We pull over to the filling station, which is not a gas station. In the case of our metabolism, it's really the kitchen table, the refrigerator, the pantry, restaurant, what have you, to go eat something. Now, here's the thing. When we actually eat food, and start approaching food and put it into our mouth, our pancreas, which one of the organs in our body, secretes a hormone called insulin. When insulin goes up, it's a hormone that allows our body to absorb the energy from the food, the fuel that we eat. Food equals fuel. Fuel is into food. Now we're actually taking the fuel into our cells, so we have energy. Blinking, talking, rushing to catch an airplane, going out for a walk, working out, all those things take fuel. Just pumping your heart actually takes fuel. So you use that fuel, insulin uses that, brings that fuel in, and anything extra from whatever you're eating, all right, no matter how many calories it is, gets stored in for later use in your body fat. And so little fat cells are called adipocytes. And when you've got extra fuel from whatever you're eating that's not usable at the moment, you store it into a little fat cell, and that fat cell, it's a little cell, but it'll grow 100 times in size when it's being loaded up with fuel. That's food from the food that we're eating. And you can load that up. When you're done eating, you're done fueling up, insulin basically comes down, and your body your metabolism switches from fuel storing mode, okay, to fuel burning mode. Just like when you're in a car, when you're filling up your gas tank, you're told to turn off the engine, right? And now you're in fuel storing mode. When you're done fueling up, the thing clicks and you put the nozzle back, close the gas cap, get back in the car. Now you can switch to fuel burning mode. So that's basically in our body. When we're eating, our insulin's up, metabolism says, let's not burn any fuel, let's store it. We want to store it. Bring it on, baby. When we actually are done eating, our insulin goes down, and that's a signal for our metabolism to switch gears, and now it switches to fuel burning mode. And that makes sense. When we're not eating, we need to have a source of energy, and so we just draw on the fuel that's stored in our fat. Now, if we eat normal amounts, we fill up our fuel tank, let's call it 3/4 full, the tank is full, all right, maybe a little bit higher than that. But what happens for overeating? From a habit perspective, if we overeat, we are overfilling our gas tank. Imagine if in your car, you didn't have the clicker at the end of the gas station and the fuel just kept on going up to fill up and then overflow the tank. The gas will run down the car and you'll be standing in this dangerous, flammable mess. In your body, remember I told you about leaking fuel, all right? Instead of leaking at the very beginning, what happens is that your body goes, let's go fill up another fuel tank, another fat cell. Oh, still eating? Still more fuel? All right, let's fill up another one. You can kind of see what's going on. From one cell, 100 times bigger, another cell, 100 times bigger, so on and so forth. Repeat, rinse and repeat. Now, you've run out of fat storage tanks. Oops, still eating? Right? I mean, like, we've all been through this ourselves at some point in our lives. You're still eating, dude? All right, now what happens is your body says, look, we're really grateful when we have more fuel. We're not going to waste any. So let's take some stem cells that live in our body and let's go make some more fat. All right, so more fat cells. Now it makes more fat cells, and fills them up. As long as you're eating, it'll keep on filling up the fat. That's how we build up first extra visceral fat, but eventually it'll spill to the other kinds of fat as well. The bigger the fat, the bigger the mound, okay? And this could be inside your belly with visceral fat. What winds up happening is that your fat, as it expands, can outgrow its own blood supply. Your fat needs a blood supply to live when it's expanding that quickly because you're filling it up. The outside gets big, but there doesn't have enough blood vessels. So what happens? The center of it, which doesn't have enough blood flow, winds up dying. It won't die completely, but it's called ischemia, hypoxia, not enough oxygen. And so when it's not enough oxygen, guess what it does? Your fat basically says, release inflammation. So now inflammation is unleashed inside your necrotic dying fat as it's expanding, and then the inflammation starts seeping out as well. Leakage of growing fat, excessive fat, of fat fuel itself, as well as inflammation. That sets the stage for all these problems: heart disease, diabetes, frank obesity, probably Alzheimer's and neurodegeneration, a whole host of things. And then your immune system starts to crash, and then your health defenses start to crash, and your metabolism crashes. And when your metabolism crashes, your energy starts to really flag. And then your gut health also starts to flag. This is the interconnectedness of all of our systems. I know it's so tempting, and we do this all the time, to vilify this or that, and it's either a hero or it's a villain. Actually, no, there's a lot of body parts that are interconnected. What we want is everything to work in harmony together.
And the interesting thing, as you explain that, we can see how everything can be working for us or it can quickly flip the other way. And if we get to that point where, we have inflammation and our metabolism starts to come down, we're going to start to put more weight on, and that's going to cause more inflammation. And you can see how this could all spiral out of control if somebody lets this get out of hand. So
Yeah, I mean,
I feel for people and I can see how it would easily get there.
the problems can happen very silently, right? Because life happens to us, right? I mean, this is what happens. Why? So between 20 and 60, when metabolism is hardwired to be stable, and yet people do struggle with their weight. They feel like their metabolism is slowing down. This is why we used to think, oh, when we're middle aged, our metabolism naturally slows. No, actually what happens, our metabolism doesn't slow. It actually is hardwired to be completely stable. Operating system on your laptop. The problem is life happens to us. We get distracted. We get stressed. Financial stress, economic stress, relationship stress. You got kids you're worried about, job stress. There's whatever's going on in the world. All these things, we've got more complexity. And what happens is that over time, we start to change our behavior. When our behavior changes, it's very easy to start overeating. And especially if you're not eating the right things, now you're overeating the wrong things. It's so easy to go to that old fuel overloading, inflammatory, fat overspillage, damaging your metabolism stage. And that's why overeating and excess body fat crushes your metabolism, not the other way around.
And I think it's important to point out too that this system is actually trying to work for us. And a lot of the time throughout our history, it would have worked for us when we didn't have such an abundance of food. And we could go up to the fridge and, every couple hours open it up and continue to put calories in and spike that insulin, as you talked about, and go into storage mode. We would have needed this system to get through to where we are today as humans. It's only in the last little period of time that, because of our new way of living, it's easy enough to throw the system awry.
Completely, 100%. Now think about it this way. Another way to think about it is, imagine if you are somebody who doesn't get a chance to eat very much. Maybe you're on a budget, and so you have to watch what you're buying and what you're eating. Like many people are like that. You're going to be really grateful when you actually have something good to eat, right? And maybe you'll eat 3 times a day. Maybe you won't. But every time you have food, you'll be appreciative, and you'll think about the value of what you're actually eating. Now, let me give you a different scenario. You're a kid thrown into a candy store, all right? Now you're surrounded by everything, and someone tells you, go ahead, there's no limit, get anything you want, right? So you're going to go first, you're going to be excited, you're going to dive in and start eating everything. But pretty soon, you're confused. You don't know what to do anymore because you're just surrounded by overage. And I think this is true on the behavioral level, but it's also true on the cellular level. When we actually are surrounded with overabundance, it confuses the system in our body. It can overwhelm our metabolism. And so what we want to do when you ask, oh, how do you eat? When do you eat? What do you eat? One of the things we want to do is to be moderate. Don't overeat. That's easy. Quit the clean plate club. All right. Don't pile on to your plate. You're not preparing for hibernation. So you want to actually be careful that you are taking just the right amount. Stop eating when you're 80% full. There's a Japanese saying called hara hachi ban mi, and it basically means, if you eat slowly and you feel like you're satisfied but not full, push the plate away. You're not a member of the Clean Plate Club anymore. You're fine. Thank your host. Thank whoever cooked the meal, and be grateful that you had it. You don't need to keep on eating. That's the whole thing. All right. You can just stop. That's the sort of like how to eat. When to eat. Look, remember I told you, when you are actually not eating, for example, sleeping, what actually happens is that your insulin levels are down when you're not eating. Your metabolism switches gears to fuel burning mode. So when you're sleeping, you're also not eating, which is also called fasting. When we get up in the morning, we're breaking our fast, which is why we call it breakfast. Break fast. When you're not eating, your body is in fuel burning mode, burning down extra energy in those fat cells that got stored up. Remember? So the longer you don't eat, the more energy, excess fat you can burn, and it draws it first from visceral fat. Now, this is sort of like a when to eat. If, for example, you sleep for 8 hours a day, and I've talked about this with many people, You should try to sleep 8 hours a day. That's best for your health. Let's say you sleep from 11 to 7. If you eat dinner the night before, let's say it's 7 o'clock, and the time isn't so, the exact hour time is less important than the concept. You eat dinners at 7, you finish at 8, put your dishes away. Don't eat a late night snack. No midnight snack, no noshing. Don't wait for your dessert to eat later. So many of us were trained over time to have this habit of finishing dinner and just eating continuously, maybe out through the night or definitely before sleeping, eating something. Look, every time you put your dishes away and then you're still snacking, your insulin's going up. Now you're cutting into the time. You want to actually get more fat burning time? This is the how to eat. Stop when you put your dishes away. Don't eat anything else. And now let's say you go to bed, you eat at 7, you put your dishes away at 8, you go to bed at 11. You've just gained 3 extra hours of fat burning time. How awesome is that? And it's very easy to retrain yourself to having, you're not going to, believe me, you're not going to perish in those 3 hours. And then what I do myself is I keep track of this. So I get 3 hours before bed. I get my 8 hours of sleep. In the morning when I get up, I don't immediately rush off and eat breakfast like when I was a kid. I take my time to get ready, to get showered, to change, get dressed, and then I might go out for a walk, or I might read a book, or I might check my email or something, and I'm not eating yet. I usually wait for an hour after I get up before I eat anything. Maybe even longer sometimes. Like this morning, I didn't eat for a couple hours after I got up. Guess what? I just gained 1 or 2 extra hours of fuel burning. Do the math. 8 o'clock to 11 o'clock, 3 hours. 11 o'clock to 7 o'clock, 8 hours. That's 11 hours. Now you give yourself 1 extra hour in that morning. It's 12 hours. There's 24 hours in a day. And now you have spent half the day allowing your hardwired metabolism to be in fuel and fat burning mode. How good and how easy is that?
You talked about that 3 hours before bed, and I totally agree. For people that are new to intermittent fasting, I think that's the best start for people for 2 reasons. One being the one that you said, where you get that 3 hours of fat burning added to when you're sleeping. 2 is that you're going to sleep a lot better that way too. You don't want to be consuming food and spiking your blood glucose and trying to digest while you're sleeping, which ties back into everything we're talking about today, where sleep is part of healing our metabolism. So everything's intertwined, and there's a couple different benefits there from cutting off eating after dinner.
And I'll tell you one more thing. They've actually studied this late night eating, food late night. So, we get extra glucose, high levels of insulin. Just you said it's not so good for our metabolism. But guess what? We're also feeding our gut microbiome. And studies have shown when you eat late at night, like snacking late at night, like midnight snack, all right, what happens, you're feeding our gut bacteria. Our gut bacteria have, believe it or not, a circadian clock. They know what time it is, and they know very well that when it's time to get ready for bed, they shouldn't be fed. When they are fed, your gut bacteria are fed late at night, they have trouble digesting and metabolizing the food that they're eating to create their short-chain fatty acids, which, by the way, they normally do to lower inflammation. So when you eat late at night and you disrupt the circadian cycle of your gut bacteria, they don't make the same degree of short-chain fatty acids. And guess what? Inflammation rises as well. So not only are you not getting a good night's sleep, your inflammation in your body is rising as well. And on top of that, your gut bacteria is getting confused. Like, this is, by the way, why shift workers often have difficulty with their metabolism.
Yeah, that makes sense. And how do you feel about people? Because a lot of people, the nature of our conversation, are going to come here wanting to lose a few pounds. How do you feel about people pushing that eating window, or narrowing it, I should say, if weight loss is part of their goals right now? And obviously, I'll caveat that by saying you don't want to go and all of a sudden start intermittent fasting for 16 hours a day if this is new to you and you have a higher carb diet, because it's going to be an absolute nightmare. But for somebody to build up over time and use fasting as a tool, especially in the beginning when they're really trying to ramp up their weight loss.
Yeah. Well, look, this has to do with what your goals are. If you're setting out to try to lose weight and burn fat, okay, and by the way, you want to do this to gain inner health, Vanity, I'm totally cool with vanity. You should feel, if you feel good by looking good, go for it. But what I am concerned about is really, as a doctor and as a scientist, how do we actually gain inner health? If you're good on the inside, by the way, you're going to look better on the outside, no matter what. It's just that if you only work on the outside, but you're really kind of having problems on the inside, that's just cosmetics, and inside could have a real problem. So what I always tell people is that if your goal is to actually lose weight, intermittent fasting, it's a trend, but it's really not something that was invented in order to create a trend. It's the most natural thing we do. Just eat. We intermittently eat, and we intermittently don't eat. So we fast and we don't fast. So, but research has shown if you actually go 12 and 12, 12 eating, 12 not eating, as I told you, totally fine. In fact, studies have shown that you can lose about 10 pounds. By intermittent fasting, like that, 12 and 12. If you want to lose more, you gotta up your fasting period. You can ramp it up almost 30% if you actually then crank it up to 16 hours of fasting. So 16 hours of fasting is basically like going to bed the same time I told you. But remember, I told you got 12 hours if you don't eat breakfast until 8. Now you got to gain an extra 4 hours. So you got to not eat. So you skip breakfast and don't eat till lunch the next day. You'll get your 16 hours. Now, research has shown if you do that, and yes, you are giving your body extra fat burning time, you will lose extra weight, but you'll actually start losing weight just with a very reasonable 12 hours. And that's really the message I want to send. Yes, you can push it. You can actually go 16 fasting, 8 eating, but 12 fasting and 12 eating also works. If you want to fast even longer, I mean, people have fasted 18 hours. People have fasted the whole day. Yes, you will burn more body fat. Now, here's the thing that's important to understand. The difference between metabolic fasting, which we're talking about with intermittent fasting, 12 and 12, easy way to do it. That's a nice area to start and aim at. And if you can maintain that your whole life, you're going to be actually in pretty good shape. You'll be in a good zone. But don't forget, intermittent fasting is a continuum. It's a scale all the way to starvation. All right. If you got wrecked on a desert island with no food, yeah, you'd be intermittently fasting too. But eventually you would actually be starving. And when you starve and you overfast, the problem is that you can actually cut into your muscle mass and you'll start to destroy your muscle mass. What's worse than actually gaining body fat is gaining body fat while you're losing muscle mass. So got to be really careful about this stuff. And I think that just reasonable approaches for reasonable people usually is something that people can stick with, and that's how you get better health.
You talked about the aspect of somebody's eating at night, the impact on the gut microbiome being, less than healthy. What happens when people start pushing fast a little bit longer in relation to the microbiome? So if people are doing 16-hour fasts, 24-hour fasts, and giving that microbiome a break, obviously no food's coming into the system during that period to feed them, how do they respond?
So, again, this continuum. If you fast for an extraordinary long period of time till you're starving, your bacteria are actually going to start dying as well. They're not being fed. They need food. It's like not feeding your goldfish, your tank for a long time. So that's the extreme. Reel it back, okay? And now what's amazing is actually when you give your gut bacteria a break, proper break, but when you're eating, you're eating healthy things. During the fasting time, your bacteria reboot themselves. That's really quite amazing. They reboot themselves by first getting rid of bad actors. It's like purging the neighborhood of the crack dealers. All right. And our gut bacteria, 39 trillion, they've got a whole variety. It's a very diverse ecosystem. But the problem that we have when we suffer from bad gut health is really we've got a few bad bacteria that are growing. Some of these bacteria, when they overgrow, can actually be even lethal if we don't watch out, like C. diff and Pseudomonas, other types of bacteria that we see in the hospital as doctors. But generally speaking, when we give our gut bacteria a break so that they're not overly taxed all the time with food, then they can actually reboot themselves. When they reboot, They're also lowering inflammation more effectively. They're supporting your immune system. They help your immune system reboot as well. And they also participate in all kinds of other healing functions that are also beneficial as well. So again, this is all just leveraging the systems that are already present in our body. We haven't even talked about what foods you should eat or can eat to improve your metabolism. This is just playing around with your operating system.
We're going to get to those foods, but before we do, let's really hash out this when you eat piece. And the last area I want to dive into within that is eating during our specific eating window, which is going to be different depending on the person and what their health goals are. But say somebody is having a later breakfast like you and stopping their meals at dinner. Are you a fan of having snacks during that eating window? And when I say snacks, I want to caveat that as well. I'm not talking about sugar and processed foods. If you're getting hungry in between your breakfast and lunch, are you going to have an apple and some nut butter and whatever a healthy snack is to you? How do you feel about that?
I feel totally fine with that, with the understanding that you got to realize when you snack, because you are listening to your body and your body's telling you the fuel tank is running a little low, time to fill up with a little bit of gas, and you pick the right foods to snack on. Could be nut, it could be tree nuts, it could be some other healthy piece of fruit or whatever. That's actually an okay thing. Again, when you're snacking, if you don't overeat and you choose the right snacks. But so many of us actually snack out of habit. Well, I'm just sitting at my desk and I'm working and I'm just going to reach over there and grab that, whatever. If it's a chocolate bar, filled with nougat and all kinds of other, fructose and all kinds of other artificial things, preservatives in it, that's not a good choice. And then our brain's addicted to sugar. Oh, now we're going to eat another one. Now we're going to eat another one. It's like the proverbial, how are you going to clean up all that Halloween candy you collected when you were a kid? All right. I think that snacking is one of those things where if you listen to your body and you need a little more fuel, that's perfectly fine. Choose the right fuel. High quality fuel is what you would want to put in your car. If you're somebody who takes care of your car well, you have a choice at the filling station, at the gas station, to choose what kind of fuel you want to put in. Want to put the cheap stuff in? It'll be fine, for once in a while. But if all you do is put the cheapest quality fuel in your car, I guarantee you, your car's not going to run as well or as long as somebody who really takes good care of their car and tries to put high quality fuel. Snacking with high quality fuel is very important for your overall health, and not over snacking, meaning you're not overeating even when you're snacking. By the way, this is the whole aspect of really listening to your body so that you understand what your needs are, as opposed to falling into a habit where then you're mindlessly eating. If you're mindfully eating connected to your body, it's a lot safer.
And this ties into the snacking piece. Do you feel like people ever, and the insulin that we were talking about before, do you feel like during that eating window, whether somebody is snacking or not, they get into fat burning mode? Because we know overnight with the fast, insulin's going to come down and we're going to go into fat burning. And the longer we do that, the longer we're going to spend in there and burn more fat. But what I'm getting at here is the nuances within the eating window. If somebody is not going to snack and say they have a few hours in between meals, are they actually going to get into fat burning? And then I would assume if they are snacking, they're going to, as long as there's some carbohydrate in there, they're going to bring the insulin up and they're going to go into building and not burning.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you got it exactly down right. If you're snacking, your insulin's going to go up, your metabolism is going to switch back into fuel storing mode. But this is all a matter of degree. If you snack and keep eating and are munching continuously, and I'm not just talking about like tree nuts, like, a thing of walnuts or pecans or almonds, or cashews. I'm talking about the bag of chips, or the thing of candy where you're just mindlessly eating and snacking. Yeah, you're going to really raise your insulin high. I think a little mild snacking, you'll flip your body away from fuel burning mode. So if you want to be disciplined about it, again, this is a matter of what your goals are. If you are really trying to empower yourself to lose as much weight, fight as much body fat, improve your metabolism as much as possible, here's basically what it is. Listen to your body. Try not to snack. Give yourself as much fuel burning time as possible. And by the way, listen to your body, meaning that if you don't snack and you are really hungry, be very careful, because snacking a little bit is okay. It's a lot better to raise your insulin a little bit during snacking than it is to feel ravenous at your next meal and then fall into that, oh my gosh, I'm hungry, and start to stuff your face and overflow your fuel tanks. And so, again, everyone is different. I mean, this is the other thing to really realize. And I read about this in my book, Eat to Beat Your Diet. It's really about what works for you, personalization. Every individual is unique and different. Your needs are different than my needs, are different than the person who's watching this needs. We all need to understand there's some hardwiring and programming that works for us. We have to just tweak it a little bit so that we can get what we need out of it without having to slavishly follow somebody else's rules.
That makes sense. And earlier, Dr. Lee, you touched on calories, but I want to take some time and go into the nuances here, because it seems like there's so many different camps, in the calorie realm. People that are diehard counting calories, people that say calories don't matter, and then I'm somewhere in between where I think they have some value, but they're not the whole story. How do you feel about calories when it comes to food consumption?
Yeah, again, I'm a scientist, I'm a doctor, so I sort of go by what does the science tell me? And then as a doctor, I think about like what's best for my patients, or what do I know about how the body responds? And I'm a researcher because I really am excited to sort of see what are we newly discovering about the body. So calories to me is just a word. It's a label, and it's a label for the units of energy that we get from our food. It's our fuel. In the same way that we call gallons, or octane for gallons are how we call the quantity of fuel that we put into our car. Octane is the quality of the fuel, right? So calories are like the gallons. And I don't want to get fixated on how many gallons, counting your gallons, gallons in, gallons out. Like that actually kind of beats the point. You're just focusing on the volume of things. Look, I think what you want to do is focus on the quality of the calories, quality of the energy that you're consuming. Get good quality fuel in your body. Number one. Number two, don't overload your tank. Don't overload with calories. It's very simple. But, to get fixated on like the numerical counting, if you're really disciplined, you can do that. I don't have a problem with that. But for most people, I would say most people watching this, it's really hard to keep that up over a long period of time. And I would prefer people to not expend their brain power trying to count all the calories and make a log of it and all that stuff. Use your body, get into a harmony, get into a flow that works for you. Get your body in fuel burning, fat burning mode. Up your metabolism. You'll feel it. You'll feel more energy. And focus on things like making delicious choices for your food. Like in my book, Eat to Beat Your Diet, I read about 150 different foods that you can find in an everyday grocery store, in almost every section of the grocery store, and not expensive stuff either. They're very, very inexpensive foods. Put them together in delicious combinations that harken back to the Mediterranean cuisine or the Asian cuisine, or anything in between, and go about your way. Use your life. Time is the most precious commodity. And I think for people that are really trying to count calories, do it if you've got the bandwidth and if you've got the discipline to do it. Don't do it, and try to be a little bit more relaxed about coming into harmony with yourself if you have other better things that you want to use your time on.
I think it's important we address that, just because typically, classically, when people come into the weight loss realm, what they're told by their doctor is to cut calories and move their body more. So a lot of people coming to this conversation, that's probably all they've ever heard. So we just want to bring light to that part of the conversation and how it fits in.
Yeah. Now look, other things we have touched on, but that is probably worth at this point talking about, is that you're putting fuel into the car. You want to really, don't forget, like the next day or, your next meal, you're going to be filling up again. We do know that your metabolism works best when you're actually burning fuel at a higher level. So that's staying physically active. Staying physically active can mean getting a trainer and working out. Doesn't mean that you have to train for the Ironman or a marathon. But it surely doesn't mean, on the other end of the spectrum, sitting down like a couch potato doing nothing, and especially eating junk while you're sitting down. So I think it's very important to know that Regular physical activity, movement, even for a half an hour a day. That can be exercising. It could be working out. It could be just walking around your house regularly, moving. You want to move. You don't need a aerobic exercise. Cardio is always good for you, better for you. All right. But just regular moving, if you're walking, move your arms and legs. That counts as well. In fact, the study that I cite in my book, Eat to Beat Your Diet, actually shows that, amazingly, this was studied in England, even fidgeting can actually burn calories. So if fidgeting will actually burn fat. Why? Because that fidgeting is like tap, 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 or shaking the legs, swinging back and forth. Even that is better than sitting down like a lump doing nothing. So stay physically active is absolutely vital for keeping your metabolism in good shape, because we do need to burn down some of those extra calories, the extra fuel that we're actually eating. Similarly, sleeping, getting a good quality sleep allows that extra burn as well. So movement, physical activity, and sleep, absolutely vital for being able to help burn body fat, help you with weight loss. And then, by the way, the other kind of leg of the stool is actually stress management. Because when we are stressed out, we've got cortisol pouring out of our body, which increases our waistline, builds body fat. We've also got norepinephrine surging out of our brain. It's okay in short bursts to have that kind of stress hormone out. Kind of keeps us on the edge, sharp. Okay. But when it's continuously pouring out because you are just so stressed about your work or about your relationship or about your whatever, your finances. And what happens is that excess adrenaline actually causes inflammation in your fat. And so, again, managing your stress. And by the way, here's something that I was quite fascinated by when I was researching and writing my book. Stress. What is stress? Well, it's a lot of things to a lot of people. What is one really common type of chronic stress? Anger. Anger that you hold inside. Look, everyone gets pissed off every now and then. Outraged, pissed off, you blow off some steam, whatever. But how common is it? And I would tell you it's very common. Everyone has it, where you just let something smolder inside you. You are angry and you haven't dealt with it. You don't know how to manage it. You hold it inside, stuff it. And then what winds up happening is that you are in a constant state of stress. That also screws your metabolism. So again, we talked about the eating and the time restriction of time restricted eating and fasting. We talked about all these other tricks as well in terms of how not to overload your food and whether you should snack or not. But all these other factors that you're bringing up, staying physically active so you can burn that fuel, getting good enough sleep so that your metabolism is switched into fuel burning mode, and managing your stress so you're not in a chronic state of tonic stress, so that your metabolism is derailed and you're in a chronic state of inflammation from your body fat. All these things play into each other.
And I can imagine for a lot of people, they play into each other in a not so good way where, they're dealing with day-to-day stress, go, go, go. Maybe they're not sleeping well and they're staying up late watching Netflix or who knows what. And they're not moving their body. Maybe they have a sedentary job and they're gaining weight, and all these things are compounding the other way. The good news is these are things we can change. And a conversation like this is bringing light to the different pillars that people need to act upon and start to move the levers the other way.
Absolutely. I mean, very much. If you want ultimate health, what you need to start with is understanding how do we orient our body and our behavior in that direction, right? You want to head north, you got to figure out where north is first. So I think number one, understanding that our metabolism is very, very important. That's why I chose to write the sequel to my first book, Eat to Beat Disease. I chose to write it about metabolism, and I called it Eat to Beat Your Diet, which is a trick title because it's not a diet book. It's an anti-diet book, which is how do you find your North Star when it comes to health? By looking for your metabolism. Our metabolism is something we're born with, and it functions, helps us keep going until the day we die. And we want good energy. We want efficient use of energy. And we want to actually use every body part and its perform in every organ in the best way it can over the course of our lives. So to get towards that ultimate health, understand your metabolism, the engine that drives you in the right direction towards ultimate health. And if you want to take care of your metabolism, allow your body to do what it is hardwired to do. Go through those 4 phases. Leverage the fact that when you're not eating, your body's burning down fat, which elevates your metabolism naturally. Make sure you're taking good care of your gut health. Don't eat too late. In addition to the effect on your metabolism, it also can mess up the circadian cycle of your gut microbiome. And then they get confused, and now they're not playing ball with you either. And so all these different kinds of aspects, play into adding exercise, physical activity, making sure you're getting good quality sleep, and finding ways to cope and manage stress. And I think this conversation, by the way, Jesse, is ever more important because of where we are in the world today. We just came out of the tube of real darkness and stress from 2020 during the height of the COVID pandemic. We've got all kinds of things happening in the world, whether it's war, whether it's climate change, whether it's economy. There's a lot of reasons that we need to kind of maybe reel ourselves back in and not just let ourselves out there on the fringes getting battered by these gale force winds. Bring yourself back together. Center yourself. Figure out who you are and what gives you that calm to be able to work on these aspects of diet, physical activity, sleep, and stress. Eat, move, sleep, smile. These are really core concepts.
We're going to get to some of the top foods soon that can help fix the metabolism. But before we do, I want to talk about, while we're still in that calorie realm, a lot of people, again, coming back to that classic advice where people want to cut down on calories and move their body more to burn fat. Let's talk about, because this ties into metabolism, let's talk about what happens to metabolism when we start to really cut those calories down. How that can slow metabolism and actually work against us.
Well, again, it's not a light switch. It's really more of a volume switch. So when we actually cut our calories down, one of the things that we're doing is we're slowing the fuel being loaded into our fat cells. And if we're cutting our calories down by giving our time more time not eating, we're actually giving ourselves time to burn fuel as well. But there is an extreme to that. So if you cut your calories so excessively, so extremely, severely, that you're actually just not getting enough fuel, that's pretty much like running your car on empty all the time. Like we all have been through this, right? I mean, I could probably get to the store without filling up, or I could drive home without filling up. You know what that feels like. You feel like you're skating on thin ice. Like maybe you probably make it, but maybe you won't. Like that's actually stressful itself. And our metabolism actually feels stressed out when it knows that it is running out of fuel. That's why it's so important for us to listen to our body. And by the way, when we actually run out of fuel stored from our fat, you know where the metabolism normally goes to draw energy, our body goes? It starts to knock out muscle. It starts to burn your muscle. And this really is sort of the kiss of death. You cross that line to start burning fuel from your fat, and you start burning down muscle, and you start losing muscle mass. Now you're in a world of hurt. In fact, almost all the studies have shown it's a lot worse to be sarcopenic, which means that you're burning down and losing muscle mass, than it is to gain a little extra body fat. Body fat is really good. Muscle is absolutely critical. When you are cutting your calories so severely that you're cutting into your muscle, man, like this is the beginning of the end. Like you actually need metabolic resuscitation in that sense. Clinical studies have actually shown, when they look at people who go for a heart procedure called a cardiac catheterization, this is where the cardiologist takes you into the cath lab, they call it. We call it, and basically they put a little wire through your leg up into your heart, and they squirt a little dye, and on a screen they can actually see how well your blood is flowing into the big vessels of your heart. If there's a blockage, you'll spot it right there, and you can stent it open or knock it out, drill it, suck it out. So that's very common. It's a procedure that's invasive. There's a little bit of risk to it, and studies have shown that people who are ultra skinny and underweight are at greater risk for complication and death from that procedure than people who are overweight or obese. Surprisingly, right? You'd think a skinny person might have less heart disease. Well, it turns out that if you have a complication of the medical procedure, being sarcopenic and having drawn down on your muscle mass, losing muscle mass is a lot more dangerous than actually having a little bit extra body fat.
And tying in this muscle piece back to exercise, this can be another way, going the other way, building muscle, a good way to enhance your metabolism.
That's right.
And help with glucose regulation.
That's right, because actually building up your muscle the muscle itself requires more metabolism, more metabolic capability to maintain that extra muscle mass. It's just sort of like you're going to bring an extra sports car into your garage, you're going to need more fuel, better fuel, right? So basically, this is what happens when we're working out. A lot of people think about it as feeling better, which is very, very important. Like thinking about your long-term health is a conceptual goal. You can't get in a time machine to know what you're going to be like in 5 years or 10 years. So what you're doing is you're counting on how you feel and also how you look. Now, when you have more muscle, you're obviously going to look a little better. Most people feel like they're going to look better. But in point of fact, what it is you're improving your metabolic capacity. The other thing that's happening when you build extra muscle, by the way, a lot of people don't know this. When you work out, when you exercise, all right, building more muscle is about breaking down the existing amount of muscle you have. Okay, you stress it out by working out. You tear your muscle a little bit when you're lifting, for example, or when you're running. You're actually stressing out and stretching your muscles and damaging your muscles a little bit. That's okay. Your body is super resilient to exercise. And when it rebuilds itself and regenerates itself and uses stem cells to create more muscle, okay, what's actually happening, it's growing new muscle. It's got to grow new blood vessels and new nerves. It's got to gain more cellular metabolic capacity to be able to use your fuel even more efficiently. So for all these reasons, having more muscle mass contributes to your health.
All right, let's move into specific foods. Let's talk about some of the top foods for people who have tuned into this point. They want to include, and this is beyond eating a healthy diet of whole foods, but specific foods that have special properties when it comes to fixing and maintaining a healthy metabolism.
Okay, so first of all, let me set the stage by saying I'm a researcher and a doctor who studies food as medicine. Food as medicine has become kind of a common label, but I've been doing this for well over a decade. And I can tell you, food as medicine researchers like me, what we're trying to do is understand what's inside of food. And when you eat it, how does your body respond to what you're feeding it? And what are the consequences? Do you get healthier or do you get sicker? Now, so much about food historically has been about guilt, shame, and fear, right? And we tend to focus on what foods we should eliminate and talk about all the bad things, whether it's soda or chips or sugar, all that kind of stuff. People vilify that stuff, and it's okay, when there's real evidence supporting it. But the problem is, it gets really tiring to hear vilification all the time. It's a very negative approach. So what I've done is I've actually gone the other direction to say, okay, look, there's plenty of people studying what you shouldn't eat. What should we be eating? And is there any way that we can tie in the things that we should be eating, can be eating, with joy, the things that actually bring us joy, that we love to actually eat? And this is actually where the wonderful research has brought us to this day, is that we now know when it comes to your metabolism and your other health defenses in your body, your circulation, your ability to regenerate and heal from the inside, your gut health, your natural ability to slow down cellular aging at your DNA level, and also your immune system, right? These are all health defenses. And your metabolism sits all on top of all of these things. It turns out that you can just go to the ordinary grocery store and follow what the researchers have discovered, which is that when you go into the produce section, there's plenty of foods that are great for you. I'll just list off a couple of them. And I can tell you, for every food, we actually are beginning to discover exactly what the compounds are. Natural chemicals, we call them bioactives. What are in them that actually are good for us and how they fight body fat and improve your metabolism. Walk into the produce section. You see the fruit, apples, pears, pink grapefruit, mangoes, papaya, watermelon. Yes, they all have fructose in them, but also they're very nutrient dense. They got dietary fiber, and they've got bioactives like lycopene and chlorogenic acid and hesperidin and aerogenin. All these Greek words I just pronounced for you, guess what? They all fight body fat. When you eat them, ironically, you can eat foods that contain substances, natural chemicals, that will actually pound on your body fat, and they will also spark your brown fat. This is another kind of fat we haven't talked about yet. Good fat that will light up. It's like a space heater that will flare up like a space heater. And when it actually flares up, it draws energy. Good fat draws energy. Brown fat draws energy from bad fat, from visceral fat, and it burns it right down. And so other foods that are good, hot chili peppers, red bell peppers, mushrooms, turmeric. The turmeric root you can actually find in the grocery store. Oh, leafy greens, broccoli, bok choy, broccolini, broccoli rabe. Go over to the other section. Onions, garlic, scallions. These are all things that, tomatoes, forgot about tomatoes, all kinds of tomatoes. So if this sounds like, I could probably make a nice lunch or a nice salad, or I could make a stew or a soup, or I could go to an Italian or Mediterranean recipe, or maybe go an Asian recipe. I could whip something up in a really, really tasty way. That's the point. These traditional, healthy cuisines from the Mediterranean and Asia have figured out thousands of years ago how to pick and choose the ingredients that, when combined together, are not only tasty but are good for your health if you eat them at the right time in the right way. All right. Now, what we have today, though, is this real spanking new cutting edge science, smoking hot science that gives us the why and how of why we should choose these. So go around the grocery store. We talked about, fresh plant-based foods, but it's not just that. You can wheel into that forbidden middle aisle, which, remember, people used to say, shop only on the perimeter of the grocery store. Okay, even I believed this before I got into food as medicine research. But I'm telling you, the research shows us it is absolutely perfectly fine to go into the middle aisles. Okay, I'm giving you permission to do it. In fact, I'm telling you to do it. But what I call it, and this is a whole chapter in my book called Treasure Hunt. That's the name of the chapter. And I'm saying go into the middle aisles to look for the treasure. Watch out for the fool's gold, because there's stuff there that is not good for your metabolism, not good for body fat, not good for your health defenses. But go for the real gold so you can pick out the real treasures. What are some of them? Lentils, navy beans, dried mushrooms, dried chili peppers, spices like peppermint, turmeric, cumin, coriander, oregano, tomato sauce, tomato paste, tinned fish, mackerel, sardines, oysters, clams. You can actually go to olive oil. Then look for the pickled section. There are prunes, dried prunes, also really good. Oh, middle aisle, dried nuts. You can buy nuts in bulk. Walnuts, pecans, cashews, almonds. You can buy all these in bulk, and it's actually really good for you. Oh, did I mention soba noodles made with buckwheat and barley? If this sounds like kind of like a cruise through the middle aisles of the grocery store that you might not be sure what you should actually get for health. I just gave you a clue, and there's there's a whole chapter about middle aisle foods. And so in total, I literally take people on this tour of the grocery store for 150 different foods that have been shown in the laboratory and in human studies to actually help your metabolism by fighting harmful body fat.
All right, we're going to get into the physiology of some of those and how they help fight body fat and improve our metabolism. But before we do, I want to talk from the other angle. And I know this isn't your favorite thing to do, but we're going to go there at least quickly and talk about plant toxins. And we're going to avoid lectins for now because we've already gone in depth into those in another conversation. People can go look that up. But what about things like phytic acid, oxalates, these quote unquote plant toxins that are found in some of the foods that you just named? How do you think about those?
A poisonous plant is like the death angel mushroom. You eat that, it's like being bitten by a cobra. You will die. Okay. If you eat belladonna, which is a true nightshade, it will actually poison you, and your heart will actually slow down and stop. Okay. So there are true plant poisons. I would not recommend chewing on poison ivy or poison oak leaf. It'll probably cause a severe reaction in your mouth that you're going to be really sorry you actually consumed. But for the most part, all the plants that you would actually find in the supermarket that have been consumed for not hundreds, but thousands of years that people have lived with are perfectly fine. So people talk about plant toxins and anti-nutrients. you know what? Those are all made up marketing concepts. Somebody who is not a scientist, who's not a physician, who doesn't study food as medicine, wants to come up and figure out, like, and I always sort of give people credit, mostly well-intentioned people that really are trying hard to try to have their own understanding of the natural world and what's good for them. And they come up with this idea, a lectin. Oh, I looked on Wikipedia and there is a poison lectin. Well, everything that has a lectin must be poison. Oh, soybeans. Oh, it's got an estrogen in it, a phytoestrogen. Ooh, that sounds scary, like estrogen causes breast cancer. Now every woman should avoid soy. Well-intentioned people misinterpret the details of science and then come up with their own explanation that they spread like wildfire, and it becomes an urban legend. So let me just kind of put to bed right now. There are really very few plant toxins in foods that you would actually eat in quantities that would actually do anything harmful to you. If you are a kidney stone former or a gallstone former, yes, cut down on your oxalate forming foods because you don't want to actually trip off a kidney stone or a gallstone. All right, but most people it's fine. And if you eat in moderation and you stay well hydrated, your body will flush out all those oxalates. You'll be just fine. Same thing as uric acid. If you don't have gout, you can eat foods containing uric acid. So I would sort of try to take a reasonable, like we spend way too much looking up plant toxins on the internet and then categorizing them and trying to figure out, okay, what food should I character assassinate today? I sort of think that the flip side of that is, all right, pick a food that you think is toxic, has got plant toxins. Use tomatoes with lectins, because I know lectin is something that's been so well established in the urban legend world that must be poisonous because it's a nightshade. And let's take a look at what the evidence is. Well, it turns out eating tomatoes actually helps you lose weight. It improves your metabolism by fighting harmful white fat and visceral fat and increasing the burn of your brown fat. You know what? If it was a real poison toxin, probably wouldn't do that. Oh, eating tomatoes containing lycopene actually lowers the risk of developing prostate cancer by almost 30% in men who have 2 to 3 servings of cooked tomatoes a week. Well, you know what? If there was a real poison, a real toxin to it, it probably wouldn't lower your risk of cancer. It might be the other way around as well. And so again, I think that we just need to, if you're going to go in one direction, what I encourage you to do, this is anybody watching or listening to this, look, I'm a scientist. I got to be open-minded. For a long time, there were things that I didn't believe were true, like apple cider vinegar could actually cause you to lose weight. I had lots of people, I have friends who were actually consuming apple cider vinegar and telling me that they were losing weight. And I said, it's got to be bunk. All right, that's just another trend. Well, I'm open-minded. Now I'm looking at the data, and it turns out, sure enough, eating 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar and splitting it up twice a day, splitting up in the morning and the evening, will actually help you burn body fat and shrink your waist circumference. Wow, that's pretty amazing. And so what I think is that there's 2 sides to every coin when it comes to food. First, is there anything dangerous or toxic to it? For most fresh foods, whole foods, probably not. Not that you would eat, that you would sell. They'd be banned for eating. Are there good? Is there good evidence for every food that you're trying to say is dangerous? I would encourage people to look at the other side. What's the evidence that, in fact, it shows that it's healthy? Because you got to balance that net. Is it healthy or is it dangerous? And by the way, nothing's more dangerous than some of the ultra processed foods we're talking about, right? So think about the stuff that comes in a powder or comes in a box or comes in a bag, that's been manufactured and doesn't look like real food anymore. That actually is probably got the greatest number of toxins. You show me a plant-based toxin and anti-nutrient, I will show you a ultra-processed food. We can pick out any ingredient on the side of the box and let's go. Side by side, I will ride shotgun and let's go. You give me my literature and I'll give you your literature and let's go see which one is more toxic. I bet I'll win.
Important we went there. That was a good rant and debriefing from, again, you're a researcher, a scientist. So this is important to see the other side.
Absolutely. And, like I said, I really believe most people in the food and health and nutrition world, they're well-intentioned. I think we all are interested in finding out what's the best for us, what's the best for ourselves, what's the best for our fellow person kind, in humans. So I give a big credit for that. I just sort of think that I always get like bummed out when I watch people rush in the direction of something that doesn't have a lot of evidence. It might sound attractive or sound convincing. But again, this is where we need to actually do our own research so that we can make up our own individual minds. Where is the evidence actually? What is it actually telling us?
And you touched on this quickly. I think for all of us, it's important that we have an open mind, though, because, and I try and do this with the show where I'm taking on guests that have all different opinions and they're presenting their own facts in their own way, and then people can try things on and see what works for them. And we're all different, so different things are going to interact with our biology in different ways. So very complex. It's not a simple
Sure.
thing to decipher, but I think it's important all of us keep the conversation open and continue to experiment and be open to different ideas.
100%. I'm going to give your viewers and listeners a little tip. There is a website called PubMed, PUBMED. Anybody can look it up. It's free. It's on Google. And what I encourage you to do, because this is a little kind of technique that I use to do my own research. If I'm not doing my own research, I'm like looking up something to check a fact or check a claim. Type the food into, it's basically, this is the National Library of Medicine. That's like the U.S. government's repository of all the medical research that's out there. Type in a food that you are interested in exploring for good or for bad. Okay. Chestnuts, blueberries, the soybeans, whatever you want to put in there. Okay. Artificial meat, plant-based meats, and then type in clinical trial. Okay. Those two things. It's neutral, non-judgmental. It's the name of the food, and put clinical or clinical trial. If you don't want to put trial, put clinical. Those two words, the food and the word clinical, and hit search, and it'll pull up all the human research that's been done to show if something is beneficial or harmful. And you can just scroll through that. And, to the extent that most people can read the basic summaries, an abstract, you can get something out of it. You'll get an idea of what the research is showing. And when you look at page after page after page, you'll get a better idea of what's newly discovered, what's been disproven, and where are some of the open questions, because I think open-mindedness is very important.
Let's talk about some of these power foods now from the other way around. And you mentioned apple cider vinegar. This is one that in the weight loss world has had a lot of steam for a long time. But what I want to do, we can't go through all of them. You've named so many great foods that we want to start including on a regular basis as part of our diet. But let's take a handful of them and talk about the physiology, starting with ACV. How is that helping when it comes specifically to our metabolism and fat burning?
Okay. So previously, earlier in the conversation, we went through all the mechanisms of metabolism. So I'll not put it in the context of food. Let's just use apple cider vinegar. Actually, it has very little to do with the apple or the cider, but it has everything to do with vinegar. So I have a biochemistry background. So I'll tell you, vinegar is actually made of acetic acid. Acetic acid is what gives vinegar its pungent, potent smell. And it's the same thing. It's an apple cider vinegar. Any kind of fermented fruit will actually do it. Red wine vinegar will do it. Raspberry vinegar will do it. Black vinegar, balsamic vinegar will also have acetic acid. And it's the acetic acid in vinegar that's now been discovered in research, both in a lab and in a clinic with humans, that actually burns down harmful body fat. Okay, burns down visceral fat. What does it actually do? It actually slows the ability of your metabolism to load up fat cells as fuel tanks. Remember I told you, you load it up, it gets bigger and fatter 100 times? Yep, ACV, but the acetic acid in all vinegars prevents that from blowing up so quickly. So the fat doesn't expand quite as fast. That's just preventing fat from growing. But what about burning it down? It turns on your brown fat. Brown fat actually is like the space heater. And when you actually have the space heater going on, what you're actually doing, and again, I'm going to show you a little demo. This is your brown fat, and you have apple cider vinegar. It actually turns on the brown fat. It's a special kind of fat. It's paper thin, pressed close to the bone, and it turns it on. Look at that. Look at this flame. Okay, that flame has to consume energy. Where does it get the energy from? From your visceral fat. it just steals that energy and it burns down harmful fat. So apple cider vinegar will actually do this. Now we know in the lab, it'll actually cause obese diabetic rats to lose weight. In humans, it'll decrease body fat, and it'll decrease waist size, which is your visceral fat, the fat inside the tube that we started talking about at the beginning of this podcast. And so, and you don't, by the way, you don't need to have very much apple cider vinegar. I was very, very surprised to see how modest of amount of vinegar you need to take to have an effect. Even 1 tablespoon of ACV, and this is from a clinical trial, that you split up into drinking half of it in a glass of water or kombucha or something, and after breakfast and 1 after dinner, that's enough to start triggering weight loss and fighting body fat. You double that, you go to 2 tablespoons a day, split it up, put it into a beverage so you don't dissolve your teeth when you're actually swinging it. Tomato juice is a great way because now tomatoes also have some extra fat fighting. You'll actually improve and increase the amount of weight and body fat you're going to burn down. So again, that's an example of a food that actually is mighty in terms of its effect on your metabolism.
And another benefit too of adding ACV in, say, a glass of water and having that with a meal is it helps curb your blood sugar spike. So if you consume that with a meal with carbohydrates in it, it's been shown to help. It's not going to be perfect. You're still going to get a spike, but it helps, make that more gradual.
Well, actually, so one of the reasons it does that is by making whatever amount of insulin that you have more efficient. So you don't need to keep spiking your insulin. It'll take whatever's there and just make it work more efficiently. So these things make sense once you look at the research on it. So that's an example of something in a middle aisle that you can easily put in your pantry, inexpensive, easy to have. You don't need very much of it to have a beneficial effect.
So to highlight what you just said there with ACV, it affects our metabolism in 2 ways. 1, it affects the fat cell from expanding and getting bigger. And 2, it activates the brown fat. So 2 different ways within that one food, or liquid in this case. What I want to do before we part ways, let's talk about a couple of the other foods you mentioned before that act on the system and the physiology in a different way to help burn fat.
So let's talk about a pear. I actually love pears, especially in the fall and winter. There's nothing I love more than a really ripe pear and when it's in season. And what do pears have? Pears have a lot of dietary fiber. Dietary fiber helps your gut microbiome, help feed your gut bacteria. Your healthy gut bacteria helps to streamline your metabolism, helps make your body more sensitive to insulin, so your glucose, your fuels, absorb more efficiently. But also, it's got chlorogenic acid, which is different than acetic acid. It's a different acid, chlorogenic acid. Chlorogenic acid, by the way, also turns on your brown fat. But chlorogenic acid also takes your white fat, the harmful wiggly jiggly stuff, and says, hey, by the way, taps on your shoulders, hey, by the way, here's what we'd like you to do. We'd like you to start turning it more into brown fat, healthy fat, helpful fat, useful fat. And literally, your wiggly jiggly stuff says, you know what? Okay, I'll do that. And so you can actually use pears, the chlorogenic acid in pears, to help to convert some of your harmful white fat towards brown fat. And in fact, it will also tell your stem cells that might create another fuel tank. And rather than making more white fat, it might say, hey, buddy, over that the other direction. Don't make more fuel tank for white fat. Go ahead and make some brown fat. It can actually have stem cells make more brown fat.
All right, one more food before we part ways. And I want to talk about a food, you can pick your favorite, that acts on the angiogenesis system.
So I'm going to come up with a fairly complicated food, but it's very tasty, and that's pomegranates. All right. Now, pomegranates are, they've got seeds with a little rim, a little layer of juice around it. And pomegranate juice is really pressed from those seeds. Some kinds of pomegranate juice actually is pressed through the skin of the pomegranate, and most of the polyphenols are actually found in the skin. And so how the juice gets pressed can make a big difference. You get a lot more polyphenol with juice that's pressed through the skin. All right. Now, pomegranate juice, we know, contains a natural bioactive called ellagitannin. Ellagitannins actually do some pretty amazing things. One of the things that it does is it actually fights harmful body fat, white fat. It activates brown fat, lowers inflammation in fat. So all these good things that we actually know. It also affects the stem cells of fat as well. So these mechanisms are redundant, okay? So that way you can swap and switch, and it's not like you got to eat the one thing all the time. Thank goodness that we can actually have diversity. Now, the other thing that happens with elagitannins is that when we actually consume them from pomegranate juice or seeds, it actually, when it gets to our gut, our colon, it helps our colon secrete mucus. Mucus is very normal and healthy, and and that mucus loves, there's a particular gut bacteria called Akkermansia. In fact, it's called Akkermansia mucinophila. The first name is Akkermansia. The last name is mucinophila. That's genus and species. And the mucinophila means that this is the bacteria that loves to grow in mucus, and your gut normally makes it. The more Akkermansia you have, Akkermansia is a guardian of your metabolism. All right. It helps you burn down body fat, helps your metabolism be streamlined. In fact, people who are very slim, if you look in their poop and you look at how much Akkermansia they tend to have a lot of Akkermansia. You go to somebody who is overweight or markedly obese and you look for Akkermansia, it's hardly there at all. Just shows you the power of just one bacteria in your gut bacteria that can be grown like fertilizer with pomegranate juice. Now, the other thing about pomegranate juice that actually is really important about these elagitannins is that it actually helps to control the blood vessels that might be growing into feed expanding fat. Remember, I told you the bigger the fat you're growing, the more it will try to outgrow its blood supply. So one way you can actually tame it, so it just can't grow that large, is by cutting off those extra blood vessels that's trying to grow. It'll still get a little inflamed. Eventually, it's going to die back. It's like, oh man, we give up. We can't get any bigger. And so it turns out that elagitannins from pomegranate juice are anti-angiogenic, meaning they prevent extra blood vessels from growing to feed body fat as it's trying to expand. And so here's a way to yoke back expanding fat that's trying to grow out of control by keeping them from growing, getting their own private blood supply. By the way, this is the same approach that's been shown to have an effect, a beneficial effect, in cancers that are trying to grow out of control. You can yoke back the growth of these undesirable tissue by actually preventing blood vessels or preventing angiogenesis, excessive angiogenesis from happening, so you can have just the right number of blood vessels, not too few and not too many.
It's interesting as you talk about the physiology for some of these different foods that act on the metabolism. It gets me thinking back to an earlier part of our conversation when we talked about calories, where it's clear, as you're saying, some of these different mechanisms, activating brown fat or cutting off blood supply to fat, that there's a lot more that goes into how foods interact with our body beyond just calories. So right there, we're proving a point that it's like you can actually take in a food, which is going to inherently have calories in it, but it can help you fight fat, which is just such a backwards way compared to the current paradigm, which you're helping shatter.
Yeah, it's paradoxical, and we wouldn't have thought this before the research came to light, but it is absolutely true. You can eat food to fight fat, and that doesn't seem to make sense when you think about it without any of this other conversation we've been having. But now that we have the science, and you go ahead and you start looking at foods and obesity, there's in the lab and in the clinic, there are definitely foods, a growing list, and I write about 150 of them in my book, Eat to Beat Your Diet, that you can actually find in your grocery store to put on your plate. And if eaten at the right time, in the right way, in the right volumes, all those parentheticals, by the way, are quite important. If you overeat anything, if you overdo anything over time, you're going to take some risks to go along with it. But I think that there are very sensible ways to actually eat for health. And that's what I try to do is I can try to reconnect. I try to send the message that we should be rediscovering our relationship with food. We shouldn't fear our food the way that the messaging has been given to us for so long. Food is about fear, guilt, and shame. You're a bad person if you eat this. You're going to get fat. It's so terrible. I think that we should learn to fall in love with our food all over again, connecting with our food in ways that make sense for our individual bodies. There are no hard and fast rules, no black and white things. This is not a light switch. This is a volume switch, and everybody has their own temperament and their own preferences, their own tolerability to the volume of that we can actually use these tools. But it's Mother Nature's pharmacy with an F that she's actually created for us. So we should be really grateful that that exists. And thank goodness there are these delicious recipes from the Mediterranean and Asia. I call it Mediterranean eating, that allows us to dive into these foods in a way that tastes great. So they're good and good for us.
The last paradox I want to mention here, I can't help but mention before we part ways, is tying this to the insulin piece as well, where when we're having some of these fat-burning foods, they're inherently going to have carbohydrate in them. They're going to spike insulin, which we know, is going to put us into growth mode and putting on weight. But the paradox is, because of these other mechanisms, it's not as black and white as that. And you can actually have these foods, and through other systems that are being talked about today, you can actually have a fat-burning effect.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like lots of different things that are happening at the same time. What you want to look at is net, at the end of the day, is the outcome of how your body responds to it useful or not? Do you actually gain or lose at the end of the day? It is quite complicated, honestly, but I think that if we do things in moderation, and we choose those, we make good choices for those healthy, delicious ingredients that are actually good for us, I think we'll be just fine.
Dr. Leah, we're going to link the new book in the show notes, Eat to Beat Your Diet. We're going to link up your social media, your website, everything in the show notes as well. Always a pleasure to chat with you. Thank you for coming back on the show, and I'm sure we'll have many more of these down the line. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jesse. Pleasure to be here.
Stick around here for even more from Dr. William Li on losing weight and fixing your metabolism. He's got a lot more to share, and I'll see you over there.
You hear me talking about this in a very excited way because I'm a scientist and I love discovery, and we are discovering more about the healthy parts of our body fat, how to tame our body fat.